Well, it was all celebrations in Ottawa last night with another Liberal victory. The 45th general election is returning the Liberals to Ottawa, to Parliament Hill, with a minority government. Here we can see Prime Minister Mark Carney and his family celebrating, elbows up. This is quite a celebration for them, and I'm with Mark Carney, is really enjoying his time. Lorrie Goldstein and Brian Lilley are with me. Brian, that is quite a visual. The elbows up visual. Okay, well, look, they are successful. I think when the chapters in history are written about this election, there are so many storylines that have come out of it. Two leaders of the parties losing their seats, and we're going to try to unpack as much of this as we possibly can, what it means moving forward. And now, of course, we are resuming in the face of the Donald Trump tariffs. So, Brian, let's start with you. And a Liberal minority government, what does it mean?
Well, the result is the result that no party wanted, and the result that Canada didn't need at the moment. That's not a partisan statement, so let me unpack it. Um, Look, if you had offered the Liberals this kind of result at the beginning of January, they would have loved it. But by the end, they thought that they were getting a majority, and they were openly talking about the majority. They didn't get it. The Conservatives increased their seat count in British Columbia, even in Alberta, elsewhere. Didn't matter. They couldn't get over the hump enough. The NDP utterly collapsed. So none of them got exactly what they wanted. The Conservatives did improve from last election, but it's not the big majority they wanted. And at the end of the day, either way, Canada needs a majority government to be able to deal with Donald Trump. What do you think Donald Trump's going to say if Mark Carney shows up with a minority? He'll say, "You don't have the cards. You don't have the cards." You'll be yelling at him like Zelensky because it isn't a strong enough mandate. While I didn't want a liberal government, I do want a government with a strong enough mandate to be dealing with Trump, and that was his big calling card. So that's why I say it's not the outcome that Canada needed. Either party winning a majority would have been a better outcome than another minority government, which, by the way, will just lead to a lot more spending down the road as the Liberals try and pass any bill. They're going to have the NDP or the Bloc Québécois with their hand out. Hey, what do you got from me? A little more spending.
Well, Lori, we're gonna get into some of the more specifics throughout the course of this discussion, but you have to hand it to the Liberals. An extraordinary comeback. The fear of the Trump tariffs absolutely drove supporters to the polls. The fundamental collapse of the NDP, the collapse of the Bloc Québécois, all of those votes stampeded to the Liberals. They capitalized on it. They made their gains, even though it is a minority parliament. Again, potentially propped up by the NDP or the Bloc, which is crazy. Uh, Half the country's happy, half the country's unhappy. So isn't that kind of status quo in Canada for our elections these days?
Yeah, look, there's an outside shot based on recounts and votes coming in that they could get a very narrow majority government. They need 172, they're at 168, but still, exactly not the mandate we were hearing about. I mean, we had pollsters say 180, 189 seats. We had party operatives thinking 200 seats. That didn't happen. And yes, look, Mark Carney, a political neophyte, came in and survived and won. Because at the end of the day, a win is a win is a win. So you have to credit him with that. I thought that he was going to be in bigger trouble. Now, he made a lot of rookie mistakes. Him and the truth often seem to be like two ships passing in the night. And he does that on issues he doesn't have to do it on. That was the more concerning thing to me. That, for example, yes, we moved the head office from Toronto to New York because it was better in terms of our taxes and all this kind of stuff. I have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. That's what you say. You tell the truth, as opposed to, oh, I wasn't the chairman when it happened. And as Brian has written so incisively, and what he was saying was utter nonsense. If you want to be rude, he was lying. I do agree that it would have been better to have a definitive outcome, whatever that meant, whether it meant a conservative majority or a liberal majority. Because exactly, if we're going into an existential negotiation about our economy with Donald Trump, he's going to sense weakness. There's no doubt about it. And the other thing is that my concern about Mark, like our editorial today says, look, your job is to grow the economy. We had a decade of Trudeau and the worst economic record, the worst economic growth in Canada since the R.B. Bennett of the Great Depression and the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. Things don't change. We're going to have the worst economic growth from 2020 to 2060. But the policies he talks about preclude that. If he is going to pursue this net zero emissions by 2050, he's going to undermine our economy. There's just no doubt about it. And so, I hope he's got a way to make because that's the most important thing. If we have a strong economy, and Carney himself said this, we can best defend ourselves against, both the leaders said that. Poilievre said that, he said that. And Carney said the Liberals hadn't done the job. They'd overspent, they'd overtaxed, they set their immigration levels too high, the civil service is too big, all those things. Well, okay, so you're saying you're going to be different. Well, now you got to prove it. But by all the things that he campaigned on, to me, if our economy doesn't start to improve, we're going to have an election in a year or two again, and we'll go through all this again.
Well, certainly, Brian, there was a commitment to reduce taxes, income taxes. So let's hold Mark Carney to that. But I think to the more broader point, in terms of like what Canada has endured over the last decade under Trudeau, has hurt our economy, has stifled progress, has really kept our natural resources in the ground. There's been no real economic vision for pipelines and resource development and all of those things that we need in this country in order to insulate ourselves from just having our majority trading partner as the US. All of these things need to happen. Carney's already said he's not going to get rid of the no pipelines bill, for example. Yeah, he got a lot of support in Quebec. They don't want pipelines. We're not going to see that. But I'm wondering if there is, and again, to add to that, the same cast of characters that were around Justin Trudeau are back. Like almost every single one of them. The platform was written for Trudeau. So what is going to be different?
Do I have to do a big CBC fact check on you, like Rosemary Barton did to Jason Kenney for daring to say that? Sorry, that's just one of my asides. CBC fact checking anybody is ridiculous. What will change? Look, there's the bits of the platform that Carney stole from Pierre Poilievre, such as getting rid of the consumer carbon tax. But he was asked just a day or two before the election about the industrial carbon tax. He was in Sault Ste. Marie at Algoma Steel, asked about the industrial carbon tax and its impact on companies like Algoma, which, if this keeps going up, may have to lay people off, may not be economically viable. Places like Dofasco and Hamilton, they are owned by the world's second largest steel company. They can just shift production to somewhere else. They don't have to produce in Hamilton, and there would be job layoffs there. Carney knows all this and still doubled down on his industrial carbon tax. He is committed to the emissions cap, which translates into a production cap for oil and gas. He is wedded to all of the policies of the Trudeau government that have strangled our natural resources sector. Doug Ford, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, put out a statement on Tuesday morning congratulating Carney and saying, now get to work. Here's what you promised me for fast-tracking mining rights. We need to see things like that if things are going to change. But on too many of Carney's policies, he's the exact same or worse than Justin Trudeau, believing that resources should stay in the ground rather than be exploited for our benefit.
Lorrie, let's shift gears a bit. And of course, we have to talk about the other storylines that emerged. We'll do a deeper dive into the Conservatives in another video. But what went wrong for the Conservatives in this election?
Well, the conventional wisdom is that they failed to pivot quickly enough to deal with Trump. That may be part of it, but to me, what went wrong most of all was something they couldn't control. It was the collapse of the NDP. Traditionally, in federal politics, a reasonably strong NDP helps the Conservatives because it lowers the Liberal vote. For example, when Harper won his majority in 2011, Jack Layton and the NDP captured 113 seats, 111 or 113, and the NDP has been going down ever since. So I think it was the lack of wisdom of Jagmeet Singh, first of all, in making that deal with the Liberal government, because it negated the argument to make that you got to get rid of these guys, they're bad. Well, you kept them in power. I think the BQ leader said that in one of the debates, where Singh is complaining about something the Liberals did, and he goes, "But you voted for that stuff." So I think that's all this stuff about is Pierre Poilievre warm and cuddly enough? That's all churn. The job of the opposition leader is to oppose. Now, you could argue also, did he fail to make alliances with people like Ontario Premier Doug Ford? Because whatever you think of Doug Ford, he is now the most powerful Conservative politician in the country. He's a three-time majority government winner, and Ontario is a powerhouse economically. If we do good, the rest of the country does good. So in terms of Pierre Poilievre, this whole thing about he should have pivoted to yell at Trump. Well, if you looked at what he was actually saying, it was very similar to what Carney was saying. I think a lot of the negative stuff about him started during the Freedom Convoy, or whatever you want to call it, the so-called Freedom Convoy, when he was seen, like supporting them, like talking to them. But I don't really think that was wrong. I mean, he was trying to get the government to listen. So anyway, I think the biggest thing that happened was out of their control, which was the collapse of the NDP. Could he have done a better job of pivoting faster and building alliances with Conservative premiers? Yeah, maybe.
There was certainly a few surprises for all of us last night, Brian, as the results started coming in, and one was Pierre Poilievre losing his
Yeah.
riding, and that is very consequential for how he and his party move forward. But as well, Jagmeet Singh not winning his seat, that didn't come as a surprise. Elizabeth May winning hers, maybe that was a bit of a surprise, the one and only Green seat. But NDP leader Jagmeet Singh resigned last night, relegating, I think the vote share for the NDP was around 4%. It does speak to what Lorrie is referencing with respect to the collapse of the NDP and hurting the Conservatives and helping the Liberals. Where does the NDP go from here?
Well, nationally, it bounced back up to 6.3, but in Ontario, where they used to have 5 seats, they have 0 seats now, and they're down at 4.9% of the popular vote. The Conservatives, by the way, got 44% of the popular vote in Ontario.
That's right.
That would normally be a massive majority. It's bigger than Doug Ford got in the most recent provincial election.
Yeah.
But the NDP didn't collapse and go away there. The Liberals did not collapse and go away. In fact, the Liberals increased their percentage of the popular vote and their seat count in the last provincial election. Jagmeet Singh, he's hopefully for that party going to fade away fast. They'll look around and think about who the next leader will be. There'll be a lot of people saying it should be Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew, who has surprised everyone coming on the national stage as a very sensible, moderate, prairie New Democrat. That's not the type of New Democrat that sells in Ontario anymore, where they want just radical faculty club members. But Wab Kinew would be a serious force. Does he want to leave being premier? Who knows with these guys? Avi Lewis is someone who was already making plans to run to replace Singh before the election happened. He lost to Hedy Fry in Vancouver. That makes him a perfect candidate for the NDP because the NDP candidate, as Tom Mulcair can tell you, they don't like winners, they like losers. It's why they got rid of Tom Mulcair years ago, but kept Jagmeet Singh around this whole time. So the NDP is, they're going to come back in some form. They are either the government or official opposition in Western Canada, and they're still a force there, even if they can't get their act together in Ontario and the rest of the country.
Okay, Lori, let's sort of wrap this up with some reaction and ultimately next steps for some of the regions across Canada, particularly in the West. Um, this is not a majority government. As of taping, it's not a majority government, and let's just stick with the fact that it is, as of now, a minority, and it stays that way. I think that tamps down some of the frustration and bubbling rhetoric that we saw about the frustrations from Alberta, perhaps even Quebec, looking for independence. What do you think the reaction and response is to, let's say, as of now, the minority government?
Well, Carney talked about humility.
Mm-hmm.
I hope he meant that. This country is fractured along geographic lines. You go west of Ontario, it's a very different political landscape for the federal Liberals and the federal Tories than in East. And so I would look. I don't think Albertans or the West want to separate, but they do want to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think the way this turned out, like if it had been a 200-seat Liberal majority, I think the country would have been in danger of fracturing. If not physically, politically, it would have been fracturing. So I hope Carney will reach out to the West. I think we could use less of attacking the Alberta Premier, who to me is just doing her job. She's defending Alberta the way that Ford defends Ontario,
Mm-hmm.
the way that every Premier defends the province.
That's right.
And so, how about a little less elbows up and a little more, why don't we sit down and talk?
Mm-hmm.
I also think that, look, 80% of the people who voted for either the Conservatives or the Liberals. That's a message that Canadians want them to work together. In other words, we don't trust either of you guys totally, right? But you're the game now. This is different from the past where there was a third and fourth and a fifth party. You guys are the game. And so ideally what I would like to see facing Trump is that when Trump says to Carney, you don't have the cards, right? Carney can be backed up by a Conservative party proposing sensible things that the Liberals will agree with so they can move together, because they both say the economy is the biggest issue. They both say Trump is the biggest threat. So it may be naive, it may be foolish, it may be a dream, but based on what they said, okay, show us that you mean it. Work together to fight this existential threat to our economy.
Well, Canada, we are in a minority parliament situation, so we could be doing this all over again in just a couple of years. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and go to the TorontoSun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.